Okay, so we will talk about the impact of AI on the future of media, what's happening now. I'm Henry Blodget. I founded Business Insider and ran it for 17 years. When I was there, AI was just being introduced in the last couple of years. You couldn't even really think about it because the fear of everybody who worked for the company was so great that it was just dangerous to talk about and think about. Everyone's worried about their jobs and so forth. When I started Regenerator, where I am the only human employee, I was able to experiment. So I did a lot of experiments, figure out what can AI do, what can it not do, what is helpful to the human readership for Regenerator, how can we use it going forward. That was a very interesting experience, and I can talk a little bit about those experiments. But just to introduce the panel, so what we're going to do is we're each going to give a few key points about what we're seeing and what we're thinking about the impact of AI on journalism and media. Then we will talk about some of the big questions that everybody's asking. So let me start off with my 3 points, and in fact, I'll make them 2 points, but I'll make them a little bit longer. The first is that I think AI will have a huge impact on the production and distribution of journalism over the next 10 years. Right now, most of the activity is at the edge. We're seeing some innovation, some new companies that couldn't exist before, some articles that couldn't have been written before or researched before, but that will move through the industry. Distribution is changing. For that and other reasons, we're actually moving back to a model that looks much more like the 1990s before the internet, where your direct relationship with your subscribers as a publication is incredibly valuable, and that is where most of the value will be created, is creating journalism for them. But we are also seeing great experiments. One of the things I was going to tell you until yesterday is, in an age of AI, you want to focus on the things that only humans can do and leave AI to do everything else. And so I was going to point out that AI is still not good at the original journalist job of shoe leather reporting, talking to people, figuring out what a story is and what matters, getting people to trust you, pulling that into a story that is of use to the audience. And that is true. AI still cannot do that. Can do a lot of data-based research, but not that piece of it. I was also going to say AI also couldn't produce the front page of the New York Times tomorrow. But I figured I better check to make sure. So last night, I went to ChatGPT. I said, hey, you are the top editor of the New York Times. Please produce tomorrow's front page. Please write the articles, and let's see it. ChatGPT, being sued by the New York Times, said, I cannot actually create the New York Times, but I can create a mock version of it. And it did, and went through the thought process, searching for news, so forth. And it did a good job. It wasn't great, but it was good. And so maybe AI is getting there, but fortunately there still is this big thing that ultimately we need humans to do, and so humans will work with AI over the next 10 years. Lots of things will change. Second point, Jeff Bezos was an investor in Business Insider. One of the things that he was fond of saying is, in times of change, everybody asks, what is changing? The more important question to ask is, what is going to stay the same? What is going to stay the same is, as long as there are human beings, we are always we will always want to know what is happening and what it means. And that is what journalism is and does. And so I think in this age of infinite content, journalism brands, both individuals and publishers, will become even more valuable than they are today. Because when we are awash in rumors and information and videos we can't trust and so forth, we will look to the brands and people we trust to tell us what is true and what it means. So that is actually, I hope, an optimistic view of the future of journalism with AI.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So from my point of view, so my name is Florencia. I lead Sifted, which is a fantastic job I'm privileged to have currently. I'm going to be very practical in how I approach this. I do not come from the publishing world. I've been in the publishing world for 6 months. I do come from tech and SaaS and high growth. And AI in those businesses is not an option. And I don't think it is an option in publishing either. It is something that we must embrace, and it has to be embraced within the right, I guess, borders, right? And therefore, my 3 points are in relation to how we do that in the right way and how that helps journalism in the long term. The first one, and I'm not from Europe, I'm from Argentina, and the press in Argentina is fabulous. There's an incredible press culture and respect for it. There's also incredible levels of energy and positivity when it comes to technology, something I also see in the US, for example. What I have observed coming into this world is this sort of doom and gloom around AI, which I don't think helps our industry. And so I believe AI is, of course, here to stay, and those that are going to be successful are those that embrace it in the right ways, in practical ways, to help produce more content and the right type of content and understand what our readers want to learn. My second point is about productivity. AI is a tool that can help with productivity, but not at news creation level. I see it as a tool that can get rid of a lot of processes and systems that are noise, particularly for journalists, so that they can focus their time speaking to people and creating those necessary relationships that are the future of our industry. The productivity has got to increase when it comes to marketing, sales, etc. And I think AI can and will do a great job in that regard. Third, I will add that community continues to be the most important aspect in our world, in my opinion. And this personal relationship that journalism creates is necessary and is something that companies like ours have got to embrace, whether it's through these events or events of our own or etc. Community is going to become the, in my opinion, the differentiating factor of what is successful versus what isn't.
Almar?
Right. In addition to being CEO for Dow Jones, which is a data company and a media company, I'm also the publisher for the Wall Street Journal, where I'm definitely not the only human. We have many very brave reporters going out every day at a very, very critical time. And I think everybody in this room realizes that journalism, high-quality journalism, is more important than ever before. Super relevant to the world of AI. Here's why. Journalism right now is at an existential moment. What is happening with AI is there is a battle over IP, intellectual property. The first thing that has to be acknowledged in this gigantic battle that's taking shape right now is that information has value, cannot just be taken, processed, and then distributed without permission and without copyright law, which exists in the US and elsewhere, being applied properly. That battle is not finished by any stretch. It can be solved through commercial arrangements, which we have embraced with OpenAI, for example, at Dow Jones and News Corp, or it can be settled in court. We're suing a handful of companies at the moment as I speak. Second point, this IP battle as the foundation, is that news is data at this moment, has always been, but there's a value reset of that data taking place. How is that unfolding? That value reset is now dependent on the use case of data. In the past, news, in a way, used to be a little bit like a dumb pipe in telecom. You deliver a lot of news. You don't quite know how it's going to be deployed. We can now see how, let's say, a hedge fund is using our data versus a pharma company versus a consumer. And those three scenarios, times many, many people, times many, many companies, have very different value scenarios. And so being aware of what the value is that you're actually creating and charging accordingly is a tremendous opportunity. So this is exhilarating, but if you get it wrong, it can actually also be devastating. And that is taking place right now as well. I wouldn't call that a battle, but that is an idea that has to be embraced, and you have to act on it. The third thing is a flight to quality. Quality is going to win in this world of being overwhelmed by millions and millions of fake articles that can be produced in a split second on any topic that you can think of. And so the brands that exist that have trust, that invest in trust, that perpetuate that trust by investing in high quality, that accept the notion that journalism is something of high value, not just to media companies trying to make a profit, but to all of us and to society, those brands are going to win. All these 3 points the beauty of this, if you're human and you can think, you can actually embrace these 3 points and win. And so we're at an exhilarating moment, but you could also say it's a scary moment because the media industry has seen this before. Remember, even at this conference, information has to be free. News has to be free. That led to 3,000 newspapers being closed in the US and 2 publications still being closed per week today, and news deserts existing in the US and beyond. So this is a moment where all of us, even if you don't work in media, if you work in tech, or if you just have civic responsibility, you're going to have to embrace this and support this. Gordon.
I run a much smaller publishing organization called Rest of World, which covers the impact of technology in markets outside the West. My 3 points, I think, echo a lot of things, but running a smaller, mid-sized publication, one thing that I see with AI particularly is it kind of, at this moment, feels like an accelerant to all of the trends that are terrifying to especially smaller and mid-sized publications. The crisis of trust, obviously exacerbated by AI and deepfakes and all of things we've heard at this conference over the last 2 days. Google Zero, this idea that Google is summarizing search results and having a potentially huge impact on publishers large and small, and what that will mean for all of us and how we find new readers and new subscribers. And this just feels so compounding because of AI that it feels existential and feels like the thing that is lighting a match and just throwing it at all the problems that we've seen. My second point is hopefully on the more positive side, which is I worked at Google and Facebook for a long time, and working with news publishers, large and small, the thing that I often saw differentiated large and small was their ability to build products and build technology and the teams that they could throw at these sort of things. I see an enormous opportunity for publishers on the smaller side using AI tools to kind of level the playing field a bit on the product and technology side. You can ramp things up really quickly. You can, I hate to use the term, vibe code products into existence that it would have taken a huge product and technology team to have built even 12 months ago. And so I see this positive spark from AI on the product and technology side, where there's obviously so much doom and gloom in so many of our conversations about media and AI. And my third point, I think, echoes a lot of what everyone has said, but I think this flight to quality is very much real. I think trusted voices and trusted brands will continue to rise to the top. My big question about this, though, is how will we find these trusted voices? How will platforms surface these trusted voices? Do we need to have other networks that just show organic content? Do we have a movement that surfaces things differently, that we need labels to show this was human-made, this story? It has no AI touching it. And so I question, I don't question the ability and the desire for consumers to consume human-made content, but I do worry they will have an increasingly difficult time finding it in a platform intermediated world.
If anyone has any immediate questions about where to find it, just come and subscribe to us, please. Thanks.
So as a next topic, so what changes are you seeing that are actually real, whether they're positive or negative, at your competitors that you're doing that are opportunities in the real world? Because there's a lot of hype around this.
I mean, as a smaller publisher, I do see this ability for us to spin up products around data, products around audience, technology products that would have taken product teams 6 months to have built, that we can get a sense of whether it's viable for audience in the span of a few hours. It's a real thing. Even in the last month, it feels like the urgency around that is ever more present. And it at least gives us a sense that we don't have to chase things that won't pay a benefit, won't have a dividend for us as a more moderately sized organization.
I see changes wherever I look. In journalism, we very often get data dumps from sources. And so going through vast swaths of data right now you can do with a lot more sophistication and much faster, and with perhaps more creativity as well. So for journalism, that has an immediate impact.
on the background, what's happening. Translation used to take hundreds of people, a lot of investment, and then that would go up and down with needs that you would see internationally. Now that price level has dropped enormously, and so the reach, can we get the Wall Street Journal to 100 languages? That is, those things are now feasible without huge investments. UX, UI, not just summaries, but how do people relate to the content that they're subscribing to? That is an ongoing project. It's different now than it was 3 months ago even. And so there's an always-on embrace of how do we evolve that. And that's responding to the outside world. And so all those three things have cascading impact on just about anything that we do in the newsroom or on the commercial side or the product side or the tech side.
So for us, there's change everywhere, right? But if I have to focus on a couple of the positive aspects of the change is, I would say that at Sifted, we understand our client better than ever. And we have embraced that information and that knowledge about who decides to read us, what format they want to read us in, how often, very quickly. And so the abundance of tools and technology that have helped us obtain data like this is great. I think what makes us, or what makes any publication stand out is how do you take that data to action? And I do believe that publishing can speed that up a bit, right? And so, for example, we are making changes to our paywall based on data that we are observing pretty much on a daily basis. And we are tracking those changes and understanding the impact, not just to the bottom line, but also to the response that our audience has to the content that we produce. And our goal is to continue to doing that and continue to observe the data and drive change in positive ways. Of course, there are instances where some of the decisions that we have made have led to a decrease in page views or in leads or whatever it might be. And in that case, we have pivoted very quickly as opposed to letting it drag, because we know that we have the tools now to make those changes quickly. So those have been some of the positive changes that we've seen.
So I'll give you some that I've seen. One is, Almar, what you mentioned, the ability for human journalists to do extraordinary analytical work with vast reams of data. And one good example the New York Times talks about is looking at satellite images of Gaza to do an analysis of how many bombs have been dropped. And the AI identifies all the possible craters, and then the human comes in and eliminates them all, and you wouldn't be able to do that. So very positive to traditional journalism. Another thing that we're seeing is, as you often see with new technologies, is the creation of companies and types of journalism that were impossible before AI. Two examples of that. There is a new podcast company you've probably heard about that does all AI-generated podcasts, including AI personalities. They're not competing with Joe Rogan. What they are doing is actually creating these super niche podcasts where they do local weather or a very specific topic. They can create them for so little money that they only need 25, 50, or to 100 people to listen to them. It's a very small company. Another example is a one-person company that started publishing on a daily basis 300 local newsletters that formed around different towns. These were towns that had lost their newspaper, so the person had AI create a daily email for them. Very controversial. A lot of journalists obviously react with horror to that. On the other hand, there isn't an economic model that would support a journalist in that market, and a lot of people in the market say, look, this is actually a very convenient way to figure out what's going on, and so forth. And so definitely a lot of different opportunities. I would say the other big thing that's happening is, as distribution changes, a big part of what used to be called reference journalism is now ultimately going to be replaced by AI. And this is for 50 years, 100 years, the media often aggregated one another. The Wall Street Journal would report something. All the TV networks would just say the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal is reporting this. They would advance the story. There was a lot of that on the internet for the last 20 years. Now Google does that automatically. And other publications that are AI forward, like Fortune, will often have AI rewrite a story, and it will go into Google and search. And seems maybe odd, but if you do not have a subscription to that story, ultimately the AI written summary of that's very fast. So that's a big change, and it's going to force journalists to focus on, as I said at the beginning, the things that humans can do. And there still, fortunately, are a lot of those. We still need that. So ultimately, it will reduce what I would describe as a more commodity piece of it. Although commodity piece that takes a very skilled human. It's hard to write fast and accurately and produce a great story. And now companies like Perplexity, which I believe you are suing, can do that in seconds.
Read the Wall Street Journal, and then you'll find out what we what we think about Perplexity. I think on your last point, there still has to be that story of origin.
Absolutely.
So you can distribute whatever, but there still has to be the commodity or the commoditized story still has to be produced by someone, and so that value still has to be recognized. If that no longer gets produced, then where is any news going to come from? So that's the IP battle that we're focused on.
I want to support that by saying, of course, I don't want to be biased. I asked ChatGPT last night to create the front page of the Wall Street Journal, too. And here it did not say, I can't do that. Maybe the Wall Street Journal isn't suing them. Anyway, it said, sure, and immediately spat out a glorious version with your bylines.
Yes.
Amazing. But I think it was pulling it off of your wires or what have you. It wasn't a terrible job, but yes, using your stories to create it.
And so, exactly, and why is that possible? Because we have a deal with OpenAI. And so, yeah, that is legit. And we're not going after them because they're recognizing that value.
All right, so I assume all of you are often asked by talented young people who want to be in journalism, what do I do? Is the future, am I toast, or are there things that I should do? What should people focus on now that we have these tools?
I spent some time working with content creators in the creator economy for a few years, and I think there's something for young, up-and-coming journalists to look at in that environment and to take a lesson from there. I think if we have creators working a little bit more like journalists and journalists working a little bit more like creators, I think probably both sectors would really benefit. Creators and creator journalists learning about the process of sourcing and telling trusted stories and the things that journalists sort of have in their veins, and journalists understanding platforms and understanding, storytelling from this sort of hook-based, platform-oriented style that we are all so addicted to in our various feeds. I think there's a lot to learn from both sides that would really be beneficial, not just to young journalists, I think to all journalists, to understand storytelling is taking a number of different forms right now, and fundamentally I think needs to keep engaging audiences different ways.
Yeah.
I think it's a very exciting time to start in journalism. That may sound counterintuitive, but if you have expertise or you have the willingness to gain that expertise and you can go deep on a topic and you can be a real member of a community and share things that maybe you can only learn when you're talking backstage here, right? Then you have a phenomenal once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to use all the tools that you just talked about at your disposal and reach a gigantic audience or a niche audience that is actually willing to pay specifically for that. And so it's a great moment as a talented, curious, hungry, young, aspiring reporter to embrace this moment. The role for us as larger media platforms is that we can accommodate that, speed that up, and also give a stamp of approval when it comes to quality, for example. And so I think we're going to see a shift in business models where you see that creator economy and influencers at a certain quality level coming together with traditional media companies, and that's happening fast. And it's quite impressive to see people like Dylan Page on Instagram having millions of followers just talking about the news. There's this false notion that young people somehow don't like news. I think they absolutely think it's critical, more critical than maybe we were aware during more peaceful times. And so accommodating that and meeting that moment of maximum demand that there is right now, I think there's a real business opportunity for somebody to have an impact as a human and as a journalist, and also make mint.
I completely agree. I think the curiosity. I think I would say that young people are very curious currently, and they have a lot of tools at their disposal to satisfy that curiosity. I also echo that building communities and networks is very important. At Sifted, we're very, very lucky. Our journalists are young, they're hungry, they've built incredible networks. By the way, we are hiring for 2 roles, so opportunities are always there. I would also encourage young people to seek mentorship advice from experienced journalists so that they can learn the processes, they can learn how to uncover those incredible stories that are going to land you awards and many other wonderful things.
So I would just add, I would say the same thing that journalists have always done, which is learn to report, write, analyze, tell stories in a compelling way. And for all of us, I will say that it has been almost 3 decades now that our iPhones can clobber us in chess. And yet, chess is more popular than ever because it's fun, it's intellectually interesting, it engages us. Journalism and writing is incredibly engaging. I know as a journalist myself, an analyst, that's how I learn what I think, is by actually doing it. So I think human beings will continue to do it, even if AI and Perplexity are much faster, writing on your stuff. Thank you all so much, and thank you all. It's a privilege to be here. Have a great day.
Thank you.